Thank you all for coming. I guess I'll start by giving a little context to why a non-IT person was asked to present at my IT conference, and so I'm humbled by that. And what I'll be presenting on today, I think, is something that that you can find useful to take back. It's one of those things that's out there and it's really available, but for some reason, there hasn't been a whole lot of early adopters, and it's really just now starting to pop up and show its potential. And just by a show of hands, just so I know people's background, how many people are with county government? And how many people specifically HHS, Health and Human Services, DSS? Just one. And how many people just general government IT? Okay. And then for those people not with county, are you city, municipalities, authority, airport authority? That's all your names, I guess. Cool. Well, my background is I'm a planner evaluator with Buncombe County, North Carolina. And when people ask me what that is, I say it's a mixture between a management analyst, a budget analyst, and a policy analyst, with some other stuff learned in there, contracts, a little bit of a catch-all. My background, I have an MBA and do a lot of work with data and stats. The background of why I began using the tool that I'm going to present on today came about with the rollout of the state case management system for public assistance programs, NCFAS, which I'm sure many of you have heard about in the news, if nowhere else, or heard program people talk about it. It started 2 years ago with food assistance, or the food stamps program. Then have since added Medicaid and cash assistance on. It was an out-of-the-box product, and with a reporting functionality that wasn't really, I say it wasn't robust. The data, it had some data in there, and we weren't sure where it was coming from, or what it was really. So it was pretty much pointless to look at that interface as it started. But what they were doing is dumping all the data into the state data warehouse. A lot of the results objects, there were thousands of them. They weren't named things that you would there was no metadata to start with. There weren't named things you could figure out. So I started just extracting data, what data I could, and validating it with program calls, and just messing around in Excel. And then one of our IT folks showed me, he had become an early adopter of this tool that I'm about to talk about, and showed me how to use it with a one-day training. And as a Microsoft product, after that one-day training, I was pretty much able to learn from Google after that, which is one of the benefits of it. And it's really a natural extension. So start off with, what is PowerPivot? It's a free Excel add-in, and actually in 2013, I think it comes standard. In Excel 2013. I actually have not been able to upgrade in 2013 because I have so many users that are on 2010, and there's some functionality that if you actually have it open in Excel and not have them accessing it via the web, that they don't get. So I've actually lagged down in 2010 so they can continue to use it. It's a data modeling tool. So, some of you, how many people work with SQL Server? Everyone? So I will explain some advantages to using this, and I kind of use this in pair with SQL Server in a lot of situations. But you can it's a data modeling tool similar to that, but it's with an extension of Excel usership. So if you use Excel for years, you can pick up this and not really have to learn that much additional material. You can bring together large volumes of data, I think 2 gigs from multiple sources and source types. I think you can bring in well over a million rows per source. So even those large counties or local governments out there that you're dealing with data sets in that range, you can really go up high. And then of course, if you're pulling out SQL Server as one of your sources or another source, you can limit your what you're pulling out by some criteria. There's really a simple table linking functionality, creating relationships, and I'll get into that more. The front end, if you've used pivot tables at all, The front end reporting functionality is really an extension of that. There's some additional things, but it really is pivot tables and what we call power graphs, which are basically the charts that you have available to you in Excel with some advanced functionality as well. There's a really accessible behind-the-scenes environment to it, and like I said, a natural extension of Excel knowledge. And I think one of the most important things that I'd like to share today and emphasize to people from IT backgrounds is that this tool, if you create some expertise in it internally and are able to share that with program folks, this allows you to shift the data stewardship to the program people in a way that I think a lot of IT departments, especially smaller IT or smaller organizations or governments, have not been able to do before. In a way that the programs can own their data, and you can put the work in building the cubes, and from that point you can move on to other stuff and not have to be taking requests for modifications to reports and why is this report showing this and the data's wrong, and allow them to pass ownership on to the programs. And I'm not saying you can do that overnight, but I'm saying that this tool enables you to be able to do that. Why should we care? Like I was kind of getting at IT sources, IT is often stretched thin. I think that managers and supervisors are too busy to complete in-depth multi-source analyses, and I say multi-source because a lot of times we look at reports about different things in silos, and we say, man, if we could just see how this data relates together in one consolidated report, maybe it would tell us something. Instead, we make inferences. We assume that there's a relationship, but we don't really follow through with it. It really enables you to do that quickly and in a way that you can, once you've built the groundwork for it, you can just load the data sources, refresh it, and have it regenerate. Analysts often pull in many directions, have quick turnaround times. I put this in quotes because I kind of stole it off of the Microsoft website, but it's a much more agile and cost-effective approach to business intelligence. I really think that is absolutely true. I did not work with Microsoft, but multiple sources of data and program silos. It allows us to look at data sources from many different programs, and everyone works in multiple programs. Shared clienteles, so there's a lot of pressure for integration and serving the whole client. When a person comes in to use county services, they're often not just using one. What is the client experience across all programs? This enables you to look at that in new ways. And then constant need for metadata to drive decisions. And like I said, it brings the business intelligence environment closer to the users of the data. So what front-end users see, and I think at the end I'll open one up and just play around with it so you can kind of see, but you know what, this is a workbook that has just, almost probably overkill with the amount of flexibility the users have to slice and dice the data in the ways they want to. But as you can see, just like with regular pivot tables, you have slicers, you have columns. One thing you won't necessarily notice just by looking at this, but we actually use custom measures, which are before just regular pivot tables. The way measures worked was different and less sophisticated. We'll now recalculate based on any filter you apply. You can also report out, like if you see all the workers' names on the left column, it's really small, I apologize, but that's from a crosswalk. So if I'm reporting on multiple sources that all link back to a user with a data source that I use, so a lot of this, there's I think 4 different sources of data coming in, and I'm able to report on with those same employees that we have. And please stop, and I want this to be open, so if you have a question, you want me to spend more time talking about something, please let me know. It's A-okay. Like I said, it's just like pivot tables on the front end. You drag in objects into the labels, the values. You can filter in a normal way or use slicers. It's really just the same type of thing. Where it gets interesting is on the behind the scenes. This is one thing on the front end that's different though, and that I found really useful is power charts. Just being able to link your graphs to the back end from multiple sources, and then refresh, and you can do a lot of sorting. I know it's really frustrating in just Excel when you're making graphs to reorder them and actually have it respond in different ways. You have to make multiple graphs sometimes. So that's kind of solved in this way. And you can use the measures as well. Data sources, you can, these are just like an example of the different data sources that you can pull in behind the scenes. Relational databases, multidimensional sources, data feeds, text files, Excel, CSV. And it's really easy to import, and if you store them in one place on your desktop or on SharePoint or wherever you may be, you can connect and refresh really quickly, either in the Power Pivot window, or if you're using SharePoint, you can actually refresh in the browser and schedule refreshes for Power Pivot workbooks. Another benefit of using multiple Microsoft products is they usually create the ability for them to talk online.
Have you ever tried it with MySQL?
Excuse me?
Have you ever tried it with MySQL?
I believe one of my coworkers that has a data source uses.
And you got it working?
I think so. I believe so. I have to double check on that. But yeah, I remember him talking about it. We pull in from our Buncombe County data warehouse through SQL Server, and a lot of times, and I'll kind of talk a little bit more about this. Sometimes I pull 5 sources from the same SQL Server source, so I can create many-to-one relationships and filter down to just have a unique identifier. And so even though instead of just pulling all of the data in, I'll pull it in 5 different times from one source and then create the relationships out.
Did you have to get help from the DBA to figure out which data was what databases house what?
Well, no. That probably was that would have been nice. No, it was all trial and error. I mean, I went into the NCFAS data, and that's part of the reason that they've asked me to speak. I spoke at the Social Services Institute as well, is because the state just does not have that component of the software figured out, and seeing counties start kind of developing reports of their own was important. Now, going through and validating the data took a lot. When I'm pulling queries out of the state data warehouse, a lot of times I'd be filtering down to Buncombe County, not realizing that the county field sometimes came in null for no reason known to me. So then there was different county, there's different things that told me that it was Buncombe County besides that results object. So I put if statements into the filter, if this is Buncombe, or this is Buncombe, or this is Buncombe. And then I check to see if there were any out there that had all 3 null. Just every now and then check it, and there weren't. So I was like, okay, that should be good then. So I mean, it was that bad of trial and error. There was no validation ahead of time for a lot of it.
So have you created a data dictionary that you share with others?
They put metadata on there. It's very brief. I've actually been sharing my queries with some other counties to be able to get the data out. I pull in the more I can pull in at once, and I'll talk a little bit about our data process. We actually have the data going from the data warehouse to an FTP site now, and we use I think WCWin, or I forget what our client is, to pull it off daily. So we've actually gotten almost to a no-touch refresh of the Power Pivot workbooks. If we could be assured that the data would be there earlier than 9 o'clock in the morning, then I can have it almost be completely no-touch. But sometimes we have to go in and trigger it because it'll come in late. But that's one of the nicer things. I think to start talking about what goes on behind the scenes, having a date table is the most important thing. If you have a Power Pivot workbook, if you're going to start using Power Pivot workbooks, you want to share them out there, you should just have a date table template already in every workbook that people start with. There's a lot of different calculated columns and out there, or that you can steal the DAX, data analysis expressions, which is essentially it's an extension of Excel lingo, but there's stuff out there that'll tell you the working days and the holidays, so you can report. One of the things I do is I adjust the due dates based on if it's a 30-day application and the 30th day falls on a Saturday, the due date actually becomes that Monday. Well, in NCFAS, it still shows the due date is Saturday, but that's not how it works according to policy. But with the date table, we're actually able to use the calculated column and move the due dates to Monday or the next working day using just a calculated column based on the date table. And then you can create all sorts of related calculated columns yourself. Creating the relationship is, I mean, it's a drag and drop. There's nothing you have to do. There's nothing you have to script. You drag application date over to PK date, and there's a relationship now, and everything I report on the front end, if I can use date. So if I have multiple sources linked to date, so I have application date from 2 different sources, then I use date as a slicer on the front end, and it's reporting on application date. Yes.
So just to make sure that I got what you're doing right, you're actually extracting the data out of the data warehouse to the FTP, CSV or something, D.
Yeah, and then so actually I have a few different sources, but though I'm actually taking an Excel file from data warehouse and we're loading that into SQL Server for a Buncombe County data warehouse, and then I'm pulling it out there. But actually before, that was actually very recently we started that. Before I was literally going on pulling the files off every day off the data warehouse, saving them to a data connections library in SharePoint and refreshing them a bit from that. So I mean, it was taking probably an hour out of my day every day just to manage the workbooks. And then finally, my boss caught wind and put it and said, "You're not going to do this anymore. We're going to figure out a way to automate it." So, yes.
When there's different nomenclature, there's different naming for the same attribute across data sources, how does that map back out?
If you create the relationship, so it doesn't matter what the name is. You drag, you say this is this. I mean, if there's no matches at all because you dragged it to the wrong thing, it'll just be an empty relationship. You actually don't even. One of the things that I've kind of learned along the way is actually one of the best things to do is make all your relationships inactive, and then when you start creating measures on the front end, you can actually just use the use relationship. There's a function in DAX called use relationship that you can just choose which relationships to use. That way I could actually have multiple dates connected to PK date and then use a use relationship function to decide which one I do. But as far as creating the relationships like that, I mean, you could right click and type it and choose which objects, but this is the easiest, just drag and drop. Just showing you an example. I mean, that's literally some example of the DAX that are used to look at that example that I talked about earlier about moving the due date to the next day. It's just as simple as Excel formulas. I mean, really, if you have good Excel users out there in your programs, it won't take long for them to be able to take this and run with it. As much as it can seem to go in first.
And those variables are coming from your primary table that you linked off of, like
Excuse me?
working day. If working day, for instance, was some other day on another table, it's whatever your primary is that you're supported.
It's whatever the row is that in the data set you've connected to. So if I'm looking at a row of data that's relating to a pending application, that application date, I built DAX based on that app date plus 30 days plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and all based on that data connection. And then anything you create a calculated column for, you can use as a slicer in the front end. And I just already kind of talked about that. I think in Excel 2013 they added in the distinct count function as just a regular Excel function, but in previous versions of Excel there wasn't a distinct count. It was just in Power Pivot, so that's one thing that I thought was. So I can have I can say how many applicants do we have, applications do we have with distinct applicants, and then how many program applications do we have. So if someone's applying for multiple programs, you can kind of look at the difference there. And that's just some more example DAX of determining, breaking out the different program types, because in NCLGISA there was just medical assistants. So I had to use, but that wasn't what our program people were used to. There was many types of medical assistants. There was retroactive medical assistants. There was medical assistants for the disabled or blind, some of which had different due dates, but that wasn't built in. So had to, part of this, the impetus for using this was to be able to go in and say, I want them to be able to report on what they're used to reporting on, to know whether this app is overdue at 50 days or whether it's fine because it's a 90-day disability app and they're waiting on DDS to determine a decision and not to be, punitively punished, but also not to feel like they don't have control over of their workload in the way they have in the past. Ands and ors, I mean, there's a little bit difference to Excel, but really not much. Custom measures, I think this is a really good functionality that's built in that you didn't have with pivot tables before. Is the ability you can create whatever measure you want and then use it on the front end, and it'll auto calculate based on whatever you filter or slice down to. That's something that I use quite a bit. Just talking about relationships again, and feel free to ask. I know you had a question about relationships. I don't want to harp on this too long, but if you one of the things I do is I use the state CNDS number, which is pretty much a common identifier across all social services programs. But if I needed to, and the NCID is a common identifier, so I pretty much link everything on NCID back to a crosswalk that has all our staff in it. But then I have some of the other stuff that I can slice on based on the person's function. And then this crosswalk I've kind of given, I save it to SharePoint as a list, and all of our supervisors and program administrators have access to go in and make changes if they want the reporting to, oh, this person, I don't want them counting it as this anymore because they're a supervisor or so forth. They can go in and make those changes themselves, and when the data refreshes, it's not like they have to put in a request or anything like that, so they kind of have some ownership over it. Looking at common identifiers, that's kind of how it looks. Once you create a relationship, I'm pulling over, let's say I want to see, I have a list of Medicaid cases, and I just create a new column and say, show me the related FNS case, and then it pulls over, and then I can create another calculated column that says if this is blank, give it a 1, and then I can create a count as a custom measure at the bottom. It's pretty self-explanatory, but useful. Just some ideas for using Power Pivot for some quick hit stuff that I thought has been really useful. Is I took data from HR and from our time cards to look at and then mixed it with productivity data. So instead of just saying you did 100 applications this month, you did 50 applications this month, I can see how many applications they did for how much time they worked, and have it report out in one report, looking at all that together. And then, of course, looking at case participants for multiple programs and seeing the match rate, and then refreshing it every month, looking at it over time, so we can see what is our crossover between FNS and if we make it an effort to make sure that everyone that's eligible for food assistance that has a child 5 or under gets enrolled in the WIC program. We can view and see actually what that crossover is before getting data from WIC is their issue. One of the cool things is Power Pivot is also integrated with Bing Maps. I never really used Bing Maps until I saw that. That was a good thing. But you can use that same slicing functionality in Power View through SharePoint, but I think they're enabling some in the new releases some functionality to do it outside of SharePoint, where you can, if you had a multi-region or multi-city business or organization, you could look at statistics and drill in and slice by location, and it integrates with the maps. And like I said before, I publish all these to SharePoint and manage and schedule automatic data refreshes. And we have it set up with Excel Web Services. We have some dashboards that are built that you actually go in and interact in the browser. So we have some of our higher level dashboards that our senior leadership look at daily, and then we have our workbooks that our staff get into and actually get in the weeds in. So we have multiple levels. Our data process, which I got a little bit into, was we scheduled the NC Fast queries from the data warehouse. They're saved to an FTP folder. We use the client to grab them. SQL Server ETL jobs populates our tables, our cubes, and then we have it automatically refresh the Power Pivot workbooks and use Excel Web Services for the dashboards. This is but an example of one of our high-level summary dashboards, and we use some basic script editor web parts to make the look a little bit more webby, if you will. part of it was having all those, like, it was a little overwhelming for people who were just wanting to be users and consumers of the data to have all the options to edit and stuff like that, so to really make it look as much like a website as possible. That's just an example, and they can click and drill into some additional detail without actually going into Excel. There's a list of some of the workbooks that I maintain, PowerPoint workbooks on a regular basis. And I did want to show an example before I go in. Does anyone have any questions?
A quick question about the
Sure.
FTP. So we're trying, from comparison, we're trying to do the same or similar things for our DSS folks, and we've had lots of trouble getting access to the FTP environment. Did you go through that with the state IT?
Yeah, you talked to the data warehouse folks, Robin Register and Mike Greenwald.
Yes.
Those folks.
Yeah, there's technical issues now. What?
Do you know what client you're using?
We haven't gotten that.
Oh, you haven't gotten to that point.
Access to the FTP
Okay.
folders within the data warehouse.
Huh. Because every county, as far as I understood, every county already had an FTP folder.
That's what I thought too. And we used to do a lot of this via email, but email is no longer, you can't do that for security reasons.
Sure.
So we're trying to do FTP.
Yeah, if you want to get with me, and the person that one of our IT folks actually set up the FTP. I know he had a problem with FileZilla, but that's after he got into it. It sounds like y'all haven't gotten that far, but there have been some issues with it failing, the jobs failing occasionally, and we're trying to work that out. I know that they don't have a whole lot of people working within the data warehouse. So.
Do the queries that run daily and spit to the FTP, are they running on your NCID? Or you have
Yeah, they're running in my through my login, and I sent copies to several people because they didn't buy a bus.
Right.
But they're actually pretty basic. Some of them are modified based on there were some state sanctioned queries, but they tried to mimic management reports, and they weren't really that useful. So I just really pulling as much raw data out as I can and just doing any of the manipulation of either on the power pivot side or on or how I pull it out from SQL Server. Yes. It does, yeah. SharePoint has web parts for Excel services. Even if you just upload an Excel file and you click on it, on SharePoint, it'll open it in the browser. I mean, it's built in, but if you actually want to create more of a dashboard view, you can use a web part and insert an Excel services web part. And so that's actually been really useful. We've been building all our dashboards with Excel web services. We looked at some other options, but it just made the most sense. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it, and then have that really easy editable access in the background. This is the biggest workbook that, I had to actually upgrade to 64-bit because it was crashing. There's so much memory. That's another, one of the other benefits is that a lot of the processing and refreshing happens in memory rather than on server base, with the exception of when you refresh in SharePoint. So these are just kind of this is just one data source, but you can see on this side where all the relationships are. One of the struggles was making sure that you had a many-to-one relationship when you create relationships if you wanted to. If I'm creating between two sources and it's got, let's say I'm using social security number, and there's multiple rows with that social security number in each data set, the relationship will work. So that was a struggle until I got everything in SQL Server and was able to pull out the max value of something if I needed to create a many-to-one source off of a whole list of something, or a relationship off of a whole list of something. It made it a lot easier. I mean, this is just an example of all the relationships that are running out of this notebook. It's kind of probably could organize these better, but I mean, it's okay. And it believe it or not, it all has a use. It's not just for fun. One of the benefits is I was able able to start this with just minimal information and build and build and build and make it more useful based on questions and needs. So it wasn't one of those things where it said, I'm going to publish a workbook, and I spent 2 years and got to that day where I released it to everybody. It's been a work in progress, and I think that's another benefit of it, is saying, making the program the data stewards is, they can start with something that works and helps, and then make it more robust as they go along with feedback and input. There's a lot of different stuff you can do with like KPIs and things like that. Is there anything, I'm trying to think of what else to show you within it in the workbook. Does anybody have more questions about functionality or?
You mentioned Power View, in addition to Power View, do you guys have that level of SQL Server, the BI or the enterprise edition, so that you have Power View?
We do. We have Power View. We use it for a few different things. We've been kind of shifting towards just using Excel web services in there, because we had a few Power View, and it just, it was nice. It had a lot of bells and whistles, but there was a big that we saw. If we start using, if we did more mapping type stuff with big maps, and if we wanted to have a lot of different bells and whistles within the same dashboard, then there's an advantage. We started off, we have an HR Power View dashboard, and then all the ones we built since Excel web services are, I think, better looking, easier to use. So basically, what this workflow does is it just allows us to look at all our pending apps by program type, and then we have an internal OSS ticketing system. So if someone submits a ticket, I can tell which pending applications have tickets, so we know, and then how long they've had a ticket. So this is, if I was to drill down, I can see which application reference, and I can keep on going down into more detail. How many applicants, whether it's overdue. This is obviously no slices apply, but if I'm a worker, I can go in and see my own. And part of the holdup was whether or not we wanted everyone to see everybody's work, and we made a decision that was okay. We thought, if we got time to be looking at other people's work, we probably didn't want to do anyway. And we're not in Union State, so that camera so if I'm a supervisor, I can go in and just look at my staff. That's using that crosswalk, and they can change and take on a new worker, and today and the next day it'll shift that relationship. Then you can drill in and do a lot of reporting based on supervisor, based on worker, and then you can make it so the slicers all do it goes down to the graphs and the tables. You can have multiple relationships with different graphs or tables with the same slicers. So you can see all their apps by due date. So this gives the supervisors the ability to go in and see if they have a certain amount of apps that are too many apps for their unit are due in 2 weeks from now. They're going to be able to be proactive about it and have a visual to kind of reference. And just in this world, supervisors, maybe the old world supervisors could keep up with that stuff without this type of aid, but in the new world, there's just not enough time. They need that flag. They need something that's telling them, you need to look at this. I put this little today. It's not actually a slicer, but that's just lets them know what the overdue statuses are calculated on. So if I haven't received a refresh, then I didn't, it'll tell them if it's showing as overdue. It's because it's still on the pending list and the due date falls before the state. I wanted to look at internet connection on just the dashboards, but kind of creating the due dates. You can write the DAX with lots of different data types in the same DAX formula, which is another thing that's beneficial, and build in calculations. There's a lot of probably levels of efficiency that I did not consider when I started building these. Like if you write, when you write some of these formulas, there's definitely a more efficient and low memory way to do it. But when you're trying to get stuff done quickly, you just go back and then you don't have time to go back and fix it. So I'll tell you, I probably could have saved a lot of waiting time for stuff to load by, if I went back in and just had a few weeks just to focus on rewriting the DAX and this, and all these calculated comments, I could probably do it in a way more efficient way. Like you could bring, this is stuff from the date table, it's just a lookup, you're using lookup values. I want to see what so we have a sub deadline, so an app may be due in 30 days, but they need to send out a request for information by the 10th day. So I just am looking up the value of what 10 plus days from the app date would be and bringing that in, and then classifying it however you want. It's another thing that, I think goes better with program folks is I'm able to create, like, sure, you have this need, and I'm able to create a slicer that tells you, but even just something naming the slicers in a way that is easily understood is something that you can pass on to the program people and know the lingo and know the terminology that will be most useful, and not have to have them file a request every time they need something changed in a report, as we have had to do in the past. Is there any other questions? I know we've got 20 minutes, so I'm happy to show some other examples or talk about some other ways we've used it and we're using it. Kind of try to leave a lot of time. But for the end users to use, it was really just an hour class with some of the with our caseworkers that actually use the front end. As far as there was some people have difficulty even with just operating with it. I did create I created a PowerPoint that we sent out. I sent out to everybody after the training so they can reference back and see, like, I think one of the dangers is someone forgetting, like, for example, forgetting they have a slicer selected or something like, I don't have any overdue apps, and they forgot that they had medical assistance selected, and maybe they had some overdue food assistance applications. So like, training people to know before if you've left it open for a while, clear your filters out, and those little things I think are the things that people can struggle with. This is not our end goal. I think our end goal is to really build it so people have a little bit more of a personalized dashboard that really gives it to them in a simple way. What I did here was basically I overkill it with flexibility. So anything you wanted to look at, and probably a lot of things you don't want to look at, you can in this workbook. And then I think a lot of people, the supervisors a lot of times for some workers were going in and pulling out data off of this and giving it to certain workers until there was kind of a push that they're not going to do that anymore. You've got to learn how to use it, and then all of a sudden there was a second wave of trainings that popped up. But I think it really doesn't take much. I think, especially if you're naming the slicers things that people understand, like click here to see your apps that are overdue. I could even rename some of the slicer options to make it really easy, strip out a lot of the extra stuff. But right now I have different users at different levels using the same workbooks. Automating the process will make it a lot easier to break those out and have maybe different, simpler workbooks for depending on the user. I tried to have the biggest workbooks I could, doing the most they could at first, since I was manually saving stuff and refreshing them every day. I don't think this is the only tool to get to this end necessarily, but I think the benefit is really that it's accessible to non-IT people. I have no IT background. I have an MPA and some stats and data stuff that I absolutely know. I've learned a little bit of SQL scripting just so I can pull stuff out of there into Power Pivot, but before that I had no knowledge of that. So that's really I think that's really the selling point.
How much the ETL jobs that happen to push it into SQL, how much actual transformation has happened there as opposed to what you're doing in your workload? For example, kind of obfuscating the column names and things like that. Is that something that you build with IT?
I worked with our IT folks to rename some of the stuff,
Okay.
to give it simpler names, like the CNDS ID, the case at CNDS ID, for example, was named ICPRI CNDS, and I just like, that's case head CNDS. And so when we bring it out of the cube, the data cube, it'll already be named that. So a little bit of renaming, but just one time for each data table that we start bringing in, and then we move along.
So you are pushing it into a cube yourself,
I'm not building any of the measures or any of the calculated columns in the cube at all. Just the cube is just the raw data from the data warehouse, and then all the calculated columns and all that are built into the workbooks.
Are there other than your workbooks here, are there other consumers of that cube throughout the city or county?
Of the cube with NC Fast data, no, we're the only consumers. We have our Bunker County data warehouse. We have tons and tons of stuff in there, and there's really been a push for our county over the past 6 months to make dashboards for everything, and so we've done we've been pulling in some social work data from the data warehouse as well, and then pulling in stuff out of our environmental health system, wells and permits and things like that, and use Power Pivot as the back engine for all those dashboards as well. And it kind of gives you don't have to maintain. There's a lot of things that are just quicker in using Power Pivot than having to refine it in SQL Server. Not being a user, I wouldn't just take my word for it, but I think people that do use both will tell you that there's some certain things, especially when you get down into the really granular, there's certain things that are just monumentally quicker to do on the Power Pivot side than worry about it in SQL Server.
So do you lock down any of the workload so that
I do. I don't have, I have using SharePoint groups. I just have all of our regular economic services staff that use like this workbook. They have no edit rights at all. And then I have stuff that I want people to have a little bit more rights to have in a different location, things in a different location. And then same with we've actually built a quality control input form on SharePoint. It's actually one of the cool things that we're doing in integrating it using Power Pivot is we created a form that feeds a SharePoint list that for quality control, and then we can pull those quality measures into the productivity workbooks and say, so here's what you completed, and here's your quality control score. So it gives the balance of not just outputs but also quality, and allows people to look at it in one place. We're ultimately going to arrive at having a full-on, sort of. You're meeting with your supervisor, meeting with your staff member once a month, and you'll be able to pull up a report that will just basically give a widespread view of their performance across multiple systems, how much they worked, their sick leave, whatever, and have it all controlled, so they don't have to say, oh well, this person didn't complete as much because they were on leave for a week, and then by that time you've qualified so many things that there's no point in even looking at what they did. Whether or not it mattered. So, I think it's pretty endless, the ideas that we've had, and really getting that low-hanging fruit has been the fun. So what you're seeing right here is definitely not an end product, but I think it's something that is really useful to adopt. So I'm just the messenger here more so than. I could teach a class on Power Pivot. I could teach people to do what I've done with it, but I would not be hired by Microsoft to go around training people on how to use Power Pivot. So I'll put that out there. As much as that I have gotten requests to do. I still discover new things that you can do with it all the time, which is a lot of cool stuff. All right, is everybody here up on the Excel 2013? So, pulling a lot of the data sets in, using Power Query, you can actually do that and use those Power Query. They'll refresh from the website that you pull it from. You can use it as a data source in Data Warehouse or in Power Pivot as well. So there's a lot of cool functionality that they're adding in. Any other questions? Feel free to pull me aside and I'll share my contact info. I guess I don't have it on here, but it is it's my name, rob.marl@montgomerycounty.org. And I'm happy to share any of the work we've done. I will say that if you work for a county and you haven't talked to your social services folks, that reporting is a huge challenge for everyone. And I think that some quick victories, will really bring things along for that organ, or for us really as a state, because if Mecklenburg County or Guilford County, doesn't have reporting, and we end up with a huge backlog, and the USDA cuts funding to all North Carolina counties, not just to the county that are struggling. So. Thank you all. Yeah.
Yeah.